Can selective memory erasure be done? Chapter 1. The Promise and the Trap of Forgetting. If you could pluck a single thread from the tapestry of your life, a night, a face, a room where your heart learned the shape of fear and watch it dissolve like fog, would you do it? The question sounds like a dare. It also sounds like mercy. We use words like selective memory erasure to make it feel clinical, a procedure with white gloves and blinking monitors. But underneath the sterile gloss is a human longing, as old as heartbreak itself. The wish to keep the wisdom a wound gave us without the wound. We want to lift away the pain, but not the lesson, the scar, but not the story. We want precision, to see whether that is possible and at what cost. We have to reach into the living machinery of memory. That is where this book begins. A tour through the architectures that let you say, I, the dynamic scaffolding on which your past sits, fidgets, and sometimes, unexpectedly, changes its mind. Memory isn't a cabinet. It's a conversation that never stops. What a memory really is. Close your eyes and recall the first room you remember as a child. The carpet color will come back first, or the smell of dust, or the way the window cast a rectangle of morning light on the floor. You might remember a particular afternoon when your mother or father knelt to tie your shoelace, and the knot seemed like a tiny magician's trick. That recollection feels like a photograph. But what you're feeling is a performance in real time, an orchestra striking up the overture the instant you raise the baton of attention. The players are not ghosts, they are cells, and the music is electricity. When we speak of engrams or memory traces, we are talking about distributed patterns of activity across neural populations, strengthened by proteins that reinforce synapses, junctions, where one neuron whispers to another. Recalling a memory reactivates that pattern and, crucially, makes it labile. A remembered memory is not like a book removed from a shelf and read. It is a glass reheated and reblown in the furnace of your present self. It may cool into roughly the same shape, but it will not be perfectly the same. This is both terrifying and liberating. It means memory is editable, but it also means every edit edits you. The many names of remembering. We use one word memory for several different kinds of remembering that live in different neighborhoods of the brain. There is episodic memory, the time and place stories dressed in the costumes of context. There is semantic memory, facts without the parties they attended. Paris is the capital of France. 2 and 2 make 4. The sun is a star. There are procedural memories, the body's wordless wisdom, how to ride a bicycle, how to type without thinking, how to maintain balance in a crowded room or an argument. Emotional memory, too, does not simply sit in one place. It weaves through everything, tinting recollection with fear, love, shame, pride, hunger, safety. If you ask whether selective erasure is possible, the first rejoinder is, selective of what? A date? A tone of voice? The knot of shame tied to a Saturday morning in October? A smell that spoils your appetite? The answer matters because these kinds of memory have different addresses, different locks, and different vulnerability to forgetting. The folk technologies of erasure. Before we talk about wires and magnets and molecules, it's worth acknowledging the ancient technologies of forgetting: sleep, time, and storytelling. We sleep, and the brain sorts the day, extracting statistical structures, pruning some synapses, strengthening others. We wait, and traces decay, overwritten by newer rhythms. We tell stories, and in the telling we sand down the corners. We edit out the details that don't fit the moral we need in order to keep walking. None of this is surgical. All of it is selective. You already practice memory editing. When you say, "It wasn't that bad," you are not lying so much as applying a new lens to old footage. When you say, "I'll never forget," you're offering a vow to your future self as much as describing a fact. The so-called flashbulb memories of national tragedies feel crisp, yet when researchers checked their accuracy over time, the confidence stayed high, but the details often drifted. You are a committed, gifted editor, sometimes too gifted for your own good. Is there a better knife than narrative? Something sharper, steadier? Could there be a way to snip the one thread that hurts and leave the rest intact? The crude hammers we already have. The first tools we invented for intervening in memory were hammers, not scalpels. Electroconvulsive therapy, done with anesthesia and careful monitoring, remains one of the most effective treatments for severe, treatment-resistant depression. Its side effects can include anterograde amnesia, difficulty laying down new memories for a time, and retrograde amnesia that reaches backward in a gradient, blurring details of days and weeks before the treatments. It is not selective. It is a storm that knocks down branches to save the tree. Sedatives like benzodiazepines and anesthetic agents can create amnestic windows periods during which new memories are not consolidated. Dentists and surgeons rely on this kindness in the realm of the body. But even when we aim the window at a particular hour, the result is not selective erasure of a specific memory. It is a shutter over an entire slice of experience. We turn off the camera, not the scene. Neurosurgery offers a different bluntness. Deep brain stimulation places electrodes in specific circuits to modulate abnormal rhythms in movement disorders and, increasingly, psychiatric conditions. It can change mood, motivation, even the felt texture of the world, but it does not pluck out one afternoon in June and leave August intact. It changes the climate, not the weather of a single day. If you came to the clinic and said, "Delete the memory of that argument last Tuesday at 3:11 p.m., the current catalog of clinical tools would shrug. We can help you suffer less. We cannot yet edit with that precision. How memory changes when we remember. The path to precision, if there is one, runs through a paradox. Memory is most vulnerable when it feels most alive. When you retrieve a memory, the neural pattern reactivates and, for a brief window, becomes unstable. This is reconsolidation, the process by which a retrieved memory is updated and restabilized. During that window, the trace can be strengthened, weakened, or blended with what you are feeling and thinking right now. Imagine fear learning as a series of threads wound together. The sound of a slamming door, the posture of a body, a certain cologne, the knowledge that you have no control. Recall can, in theory, let you loosen one thread before the spool tightens again. If you retrieve the memory while calm, and if the brain's biochemical machinery for tagging that memory is affected by a drug or a new association, that fear trace might reconsolidate with less sting. Notice the quiet revolution here. We are not deleting the episode. We are editing its emotional color, its position in the network of your meanings. This may be as close to selective erasure as we can get without erasing something essential about being human. Editing the sting, not the story. Exposure therapy is older than its names make it sound. It is the structured courage of doing a terrifying thing safely. For a traumatized survivor, approaching the memory in a controlled, supported setting, imagining the scene, revisiting the place, telling the story out loud can, through repetition and new associations, lower the body's reflexive fear response. The windows of reconsolidation may be part of why this works. Each vivid retelling pairs the old cues with a new context of safety, and the brain rewrites the importance tags. There are pharmacological handrails, beta-adrenergic blockers, which dampen the adrenaline system, have been studied as adjuncts to memory retrieval. The idea is simple. Call up the fear, but turn down the chemical knob that stamps it as urgent. Some studies have shown reductions in physiological responses to old triggers when the memory was retrieved under this chemical hush. It's not a magic eraser, but if a memory is a story scored for orchestra, this is like asking the brass section to take 3 steps back. Other experiments have aimed at the protein central to stabilizing a memory trace after it is retrieved. The results are more mixed than headlines imply, and the ethical questions louder. If you could disrupt a particular protein that helps re-glue the memory, you might weaken it. But the brain is not a single circuit board. It is a teeming city of redundancies. Pull one support, and another appears overnight. The organism wants to remember enough to survive. Here is the practical truth that doesn't make good movie trailers. Most clinically useful, erasure is coloring, not deletion. We are getting better at making a fire alarm ring less insistently when there is no fire. We are not taking the house off the map. The bright and troubling experiments. If you've seen news about erasing fear in mice, you've glimpsed a field that feels like science fiction because it flirts with the grammar of identity. In carefully designed experiments, researchers record which neurons are active when a mouse learns a fear association and then later stimulate those neurons while presenting a safe context. In some cases, the animal behaves as if the fear was overwritten by a new label. These cues do not predict danger. What's edited, however, is not only the tag danger, but the larger constellation of meanings the animal can entertain about its world. The toolsets optogenetics, chemogenetics offer exquisite control in animals precisely because they operate at a genetic and cellular level we cannot yet ethically mirror in humans. Human brains are more varied, and human lives are wrapped in stories, not just conditioned cues. This is the shape of progress in memory science. Dramatic in the lab, slower and more careful in the clinic, sobered by the knowledge that precision sometimes breaks when scaled from a mouse brain to a human's orchestra of self. Why selective is so hard. Think about a terrible breakup. It is not one memory. It is a constellation. The restaurant where you argued, the color of the chair where you waited, the text message with its polite finality, the apartment hallway where silence felt heavy, the song that came on the radio in the taxi, which, months later, still makes your stomach drop when it plays in the produce aisle. To erase that would require editing a network that spans sensory cortices, association areas, limbic circuits, and the default mode network, the orchestra that plays when you daydream about yourself. That network does not store the breakup in one aisle. It stores traces everywhere and links them like a spider web. Pluck one strand and the others tremble. Selectivity would require identifying and altering only the edges that connect song to sickness, hallway to helpless. without sawing through the edges that let you understand music and hallways as categories at all. What looks like a single bad memory from inside your life is 1,000 little knots from inside your brain. The quest for selectivity is not only technical, it is philosophical. At what grain size is an experience still the experience? If you remove enough sting, is it still grief? If you sand off enough fear, is it still caution? If you remove the memory of betrayal but keep the knowledge that it happened, what have you changed your past or only your feelings about it? Does the distinction matter? The ethical currents under the skin. Suppose you could do it. Suppose a clinic, reputable and rigorous, offered you a protocol. Identify the target memory, elicit it vividly, administer a precisely timed intervention to weaken its reconsolidation, rehearse a new narrative while the window is open, repeat across a handful of sessions. Side effects modest, risks acceptable, results likelier to adjust emotion than erase content. You sign the form. You sit down. A skilled clinician guides you into the remembered room. The procedure begins. Who should decide which memories are candidates? The risk, as always, is power applied where consent is shaky. Imagine this technology in the hands of an abuser, a trafficker, a regime. Imagine it required by employers as a condition of returning to work after witnessing something the company would rather you forgot. Imagine memory optimization packages sold with installment plans and influencer testimonials. Live unburdened. Some will argue that all psychiatric treatment already changes memory. After all, mood colors recall. Antidepressants can return a person to themselves in ways that make the past feel different. Therapy is, in a sense, a guided tour of reinterpretation, but erasure carries a special gravity because it tempts us to outsource forgiveness to chemistry, to delegate meaning-making to machines. It risks training us to see painful complexity as a bug, not a feature of being alive. There's another current, justice. Survivors of trauma sometimes want, more than anything else, to feel safe in a grocery store aisle, to sleep through the night, to leave a room without checking the corners 4 times. If dampening the fear tag helps them live, is that not mercy? If a soldier can hear a car backfire without crawling under the table, if a victim of assault can smell a cologne without freezing, if this technology grants those freedoms, who are we to clutch our pearls about authenticity? The ethical balance is not a tidy equation. It is a shifting negotiation between autonomy, truth, safety, identity, and harm reduction. The ground rule should be obvious and hard to maintain. Consent must be sacred, coercion forbidden, transparency non-negotiable. The second rule may be gentler and more demanding. The goal should be to enlarge the person's life, not to shrink it to fit someone else's comfort. A more modest, more radical aim. There is a quiet revolution happening in trauma care that does not require an eraser. It requires a different verb, to metabolize. To metabolize a memory is to let your nervous system digest it, to break it down and extract what can sustain you while letting the rest pass. The process looks like repeated, regulated encounters with the past in the company of safety. A therapist, a trusted friend, a community, a practice. Your body learns that the alarm doesn't have to blare every time the word Tuesday appears. You stop living in the past tense of your nervous system. This is selective in a way that matters. The goal is not to unknow, but to unsuffer. You keep the knowledge of danger, of boundaries, of your own resilience, but you refuse to let a single chapter monopolize the genre of your life. If a pharmacological nudge helps during the most difficult pages, fine. But the hero of the story is not the drug. It is you. The promise of forgetting steals the spotlight. The radical act is remembering differently. The illusion of a clean slate. The fantasy of erasure arrives with white walls. It tells us a clean slate will make you new, but newness is not the same as wholeness. A slate without writing is not a life. The meaning of your days emerges from continuity, the way yesterday's lessons and loves inform today's choices. Break too many links, and the necklace falls to the floor in a scatter of beads. Consider the person who has lost parts of their autobiographical memory through injury or illness. They can relearn names and roots. Their brain, heroic, finds detours. But loved ones will tell you, something of the thread is gone. The smile is there, the laugh is there, and yet the private references that form the bridge between me and you are missing planks. We overvalue novelty because it feels like escape. But escape is not arrival. This is not an argument for stoic suffering. It is an argument for a subtler dream, not surgical innocence, but integrated wisdom. Not erasing the winter, but teaching the body that spring can come. The science, slower than headlines. You will hear news stories that sound like science has already cracked the code, and you will hear philosophers warning that we are about to delete ourselves by mistake. The truth is both more encouraging and more humbling. We are learning to intervene during reconsolidation windows to weaken the intensity of specific fear associations. We are learning how certain neuromodulators, chemicals that tune the volume of networks, shift the odds that a memory will feel urgent or distant when you recall it. We are building non-invasive tools, magnetic pulses, electrical currents that change the excitability of specific networks. We are experimenting with closed-loop systems that listen to brain rhythms and nudge them toward healthier patterns. And we are discovering, again and again, that the brain's complexity is not a problem to be solved, but a partner to be negotiated with. The circuits that encode your fear also encode your care. The networks that make you vigilant, make you attentive to beauty. You cannot silence a note without altering the chord. If progress is slower than film scripts, it is also safer. What we are really learning is not how to erase memories, but how to become better custodians of their power. The stories we tell about erasure. Behind the laboratory door, the future hums. Outside, in our living rooms and streaming queues, we rehearse the ethics with fiction. We imagine agencies that wipe evidence from witnesses, lovers who delete each other after a breakup, soldiers with memories edited to make them unstoppable. In these stories, erasure is an amplifier. It turns human choices into operas. The theater is melodrama because the stakes are identity. What I want to propose is quieter. The stakes are not only who we are, but how we suffer. Selective memory erasure, if it ever becomes more than a metaphor, will be most valuable, not as a tool for making us shinier, but as a tool for making us freer. Freedom is not the absence of scars. It's the presence of horizons. The personal test. Imagine a center with a good reputation. You fill out careful forms. You talk with a clinician who listens more than they speak. They do not promise deletion. They promise the possibility that a specific trigger, the ringing of a certain phone, the smell of diesel, the click of a lighter, could lose its power to yank you out of your life. They will help you recall the memory on purpose and stay within your window of tolerance. They will time an intervention to that window. You will track your days and nights. You will come back and try again. And you will not be doing this to become someone else. You will be doing this to become more fully yourself. If that sounds less dramatic than erasure, good. The path back to yourself is not supposed to be cinematic. It is supposed to be faithful, what you can do now. While we wait for the science to refine its instruments, there are 3 practices available to anyone with a nervous system. First, reclaim the time between the trigger and the story. When a smell or sound yanks you into the past, your body surges to protect you. Before the mind piles on explanations, breathe slowly, deliberately. This is not mystical, it is mechanical. Long exhales tell the vagus nerve that the tiger is not here. Second, name what is happening in plain language. My body is remembering. Put the sentence in the present and remove blame. The moment you narrate, you stand a little apart from the flood. You become the storyteller, not just the story. Third, approach with company. Whether it's a trained clinician or a wise friend, healing accelerates in safe relationships. Isolation makes the past louder. Companionship changes the acoustics. None of this erases anything. It changes what the memory is for. The question, reframed, can selective memory erasure be done? Is a question about power. It can be sharpened into something more humane. Can we selectively remove the suffering from a memory without losing the knowledge it carries? The answer today is sometimes, partially, with care, with help, with tools that make the nervous system less jumpy while the story is retold. Tomorrow's answer may be bolder and must be held to higher ethical standards. But even if tomorrow brings better tools, the deepest work will remain the same, to practice being a person whose past does not own their future. A note on identity. When you remember, you are participating in a ritual of self-creation. The past is raw material. The self is the sculpture you keep chiseling. If you chisel recklessly, you can crack the marble. If you chisel gently and persistently, you can reveal forms you didn't know were there. Erasure is a chisel with a sharp blade. We should learn to wield it with humility and to prefer, whenever possible, the gentler instruments of reinterpretation and integration. The goal is not to vanish our pains, but to transform them into wisdom. The goal is not to escape our stories, but to edit them so that they tell the truth and set us free. The promise and the trap. The promise of selective erasure is obvious. Relief. The trap is subtler. The idea that relief must come from subtraction. Often, it comes from addition of context, of compassion, of new experiences that compete successfully for salience. You can crowd out a bad memory's power by feeding your life with more life. One day, perhaps, a clinician will sit with you in a room washed with morning light and say, "We can safely weaken the link between this sound and your fear." On that day, you will decide not whether to delete your past, but whether to change your relationship to it. That decision will be more intimate than any device, more decisive than any drug. It will be a choice to love the person you have been and the person you are becoming. Because memory is not a prison, it is a compass. And compasses can be recalibrated. What remains is the second half of the question, not only whether we can, but whether we should, and how to build safeguards around a power that touches the core of who we are. The science will march, the marketplace will tempt, the law will lag, the heart will hesitate. In that slow, necessary hesitation lies the future of any technology that promises to gladden our days by rearranging our nights. Chapter 2. The Toolkit, the Boundaries, and a Map for Mercy. A man sits on a bench outside a clinic with a paper cup of water trembling in his hand. The street is ordinary families with strollers, a dog dragging an owner toward a smell, a bicycle bell lost in the sound of noon. The man is rehearsing a single scene over and over. A door, a voice, a sudden vacuum where safety should have been. The clinic promises nothing dramatic, no sci-fi wipe to white, no instant innocence. But the intake packet he signed describes targeted reconsolidation-based interventions to reduce the distress associated with specific cues. It's almost comically dry for a question so wet with tears. Inside, a clinician will ask him to identify the cue that flings him backward, a ringtone, a scent, the snap of a lighter. In a controlled way, they'll invite the memory onto the stage and try to change the lighting, not to erase the script, to change the lighting. This is where the fantasy becomes a practice, and practice, if we're lucky, becomes a kind of mercy, a practical blueprint for selective work. If the word erasure seduces us, the word selective keeps us honest. It asks for specificity. The humane way to approach it starts not with machines, but with an inventory. Define the target. Not the year I was unhappy, but this cue, this intersection, this smell of diesel, this ringtone that turns my hands to ice. The more precise the target, the less likely we are to saw through supportive beams. Distinguish the layers. Separate the episode who, where, when from the association's danger, helplessness, shame, and the response's racing heart, tunnel vision, impulses to flee or fight. Often, what people want to erase is not the event, but the reflex that colonizes the present. Specify intent. I want to keep the knowledge, but I want to stop leaving my body every time the elevator dings. Or, I want to mourn without drowning. Or, I want to remember what happened without becoming what happened. Map the triggers. Gather the little landmines scattered across daily life. Some will be sensory, a cologne, a chord progression. Others will be semantic, certain words, spatial, that hallway, or social, that posture, that kind of laugh. Choose the gentlest effective tools. Start with story and safety before magnets and molecules. Climb the ladder of intensity only as far as needed. A selective approach is not one action but a series of small courtesies offered to a nervous system that learned often accurately that a certain pattern meant danger. We are asking it to learn again. The protocol, how rewriting usually works in practice. A sensible protocol, one that tries to be selective, unfolds in careful steps. Preparation and safety. Before any retrieval or intervention, the clinician establishes guardrails, grounding techniques, a stop signal, a plan for what happens after the session. The goal is to conduct the work within the person's window of tolerance, not to blow past it and call panic breakthrough. Context reinstatement. The person is invited to call up the target memory or cue in vivid but titrated detail. Sometimes this happens with eyes closed and the clinician's voice as a metronome. Sometimes it's supported with virtual or in vivo exposures that approximate the feared context in safe ways. The crucial thing is that the memory must be active for the window of reconsolidation to open. The window, in that fragile, dynamic period, minutes to a few hours, the memory trace is labile. The brain is deciding how to put it back on the shelf. This is when the clinician introduces a prediction error, something that violates the expectation of danger. The body expects the tiger. The room offers a teacher. Over repeated sessions, this disconfirms the old alarm. The update is not, "It never happened," but "It can happen without happening again right now." Adjuncts, not magic. Pharmacological and neuromodulatory aids may be added, a beta blocker to turn the volume of adrenaline down, carefully timed non-invasive brain stimulation to tune the excitability of networks involved in fear and habit, biofeedback to lengthen the space between trigger and reaction. None of these delete scenes. They make rewrites more likely to stick. Meaning-making. After the physiological storm has been calmed, the person works to narrate the event in a way that returns agency and dignity. The body learns safety, the mind learns sense. The reward circuits relearn the taste of everyday life. Sleep. The night after a session matters. Sleep is when the brain consolidates what it learned about what it learned. Good sleep is glue. Follow through. The person returns to old triggers in daily life, armed with new associations and supports. The learning is moved from the therapy room into the grocery aisle. If that sounds unglamorous compared to a cinematic memory wipe, that is because healing respects the prose of reality. The miracle here is not deletion. It is the way living tissue can be persuaded to relax its grip on yesterday's emergency. The non-invasive toolkit and its limits. Exposure and response prevention remains the workhorse for fear learning. It looks simple. Approach what you fear without performing the ritual that kept you safe in the short term but stuck in the long term. It is, in fact, a master class in selective editing. Keep the knowledge of danger, lose the false refuge of compulsion. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, adds bilateral stimulation while recalling traumatic material. For some, this seems to make the memory less sticky and the body less flooded. Its mechanisms are debated. Its relief is not, at least for those who find it helpful. Propranolol-assisted reconsolidation updating aims to weaken the adrenergic "this matters" stamp while the memory is soft. It is not a delete key, it is a volume knob for urgency. tDCS and TMS, gentle current or magnetic pulses, can nudge cortical networks toward flexibility. When synchronized with retrieval and relabeling, they may make it easier for the new meaning to win the rematch against the old reflex. Virtual reality lets a person rehearse safety in graded, controllable ways. It can summon the dragon without leaving scorch marks. Now the limits. Responses can generalize. Turn down fear for a specific ringtone, and your brain may or may not generalize that safety to similar tones. Or it may generalize only halfway, leaving you unexpectedly ambushed by a close cousin. Context matters deeply. A memory updated in the clinic may not behave in a parking garage at dusk. State matters too. A lesson learned while calm can vanish when sleep-deprived and hungry. The nervous system is not a spreadsheet, and redundancy is relentless. The brain keeps backups. Cut one pathway, and another learns the route. This protects us from predators and, inconveniently, from quick fixes. Edge cases. Love, grief, addiction, and the utility of hurt. What about love? What about removing just the barb from a relationship that left both gifts and wounds? Here the risk of over-selectivity is highest. The pain is entangled with the meaning, and meaning is the gold. Sand away too much, and you lose the edge that taught you discernment. Grief, too, resists crude editing. Grief is love metabolizing an absence. To erase grief would be to erase the proof that something mattered. The selective move is different. Keep the ache that says, I loved. Loosen the panic that says, I cannot live without. Precision here is not a molecular feat, but a spiritual one. Addiction cues are tricky in another way. You can, in principle, weaken the urge tied to a specific bar stool, a particular alley, a Friday smell of payday. But addiction also nests in routines, friends, times of day, moods. The wisest programs aim not only to break cues, but to build a new life robust enough to make the old cues less relevant. The best erasure is competition, joy that crowds out the need. There is also the utility of hurt, pain that taught you to leave, to say no, to listen to your body. This pain earned its passport. Erasing its memory risks erasing the boundary it gifted you. The question is not, can we take it away, but which parts must stay to keep you free? Identity, integrity, minimum narrative coherence. Imagine your life as a novel written by 1,000 authors whose names are days. Coherence is not sameness, it is continuity. You can jump in time, switch point of view, change tone if the spine holds. A principle worth adopting in any clinic or living room where memory is being edited is minimum narrative coherence. Never compromise the through line that lets a person recognize themselves in yesterday's and tomorrow's mirrors. That means guarding against edits that render someone unable to explain their own choices, love their own reasons, or honor their own warnings. It means preferring color correction over scene deletion, translation over redaction. This principle should be signed and framed next to the malpractice insurance, rights, consent, and the architecture of safeguards. If we treat memory like a public utility to be optimized by employers, tweaked by schools, regulated for the greater good, we have already lost the argument. Memory is intimate infrastructure. Any technology that changes it should be surrounded by rights, the way a fire is surrounded by a hearth, the right to remember. No one may coerce you to alter your memories, period. No employment, financial, or legal advantage may be conditioned on consenting to memory editing, the right to informed editing. If you choose an intervention, you have a right to understand its goals, probabilities, side effects, and alternatives in language that makes sense to you. The right to narrative coherence. Interventions should be designed to preserve your ability to tell your story and to recognize that the story is yours. The right to audit. Any algorithmic aid or device used should generate a human-readable log of what it did and when. You should be able to leave with a copy. The right to a cooling-off period. No irreversible or high-impact intervention should occur without a waiting period sufficient for independent reflection and consultation. For minors, for people under duress, for those whose cognitive capacities are compromised, the standard of consent must be even more stringent, with independent advocates and oversight. Forensic contexts, witness testimony, criminal investigations must cordon off memory technologies with bright tape. The possibility of contaminating a witness or manufacturing forgetfulness should chill even the most cavalier policymaker. Build consent architecture into clinics. Separate intake staff from treating staff. Require independent ethics reviews for novel protocols. Mandate annual transparency reports. Make coercion prosecutable with real teeth. We don't get to be naive here. Wherever there is pain, there is a market. The guardrails must be taller than the appetite. Equity and the danger of a sanitization economy. If relief becomes a luxury service, we will have created a new hierarchy. The wealthy experience curated, boutique forgetting, while the poor carry raw, unmediated pain into their workplaces and bedrooms. Trauma already maps onto class and race. Unequal access to memory-modulating care would deepen the canyon. Worse, an economy may emerge around sanitized labor workers, nudged to dampen the distress of hazardous conditions rather than changing those conditions. Can't handle the slaughterhouse? There's a protocol for that. This flips healing on its head and makes the individual responsible for adapting to harm. The ethical response is structural. Fix the job, not the nervous system. Public systems can help if they fund trauma-informed care, regulate predatory clinics, and enforce anti-coercion laws. Communities can help by building places where memory is honored and metabolized, not marketed. The dark patterns, how erasure could be misused. Let's be unflinching. Authoritarian regimes could deploy memory weakening to blur public remembrance of atrocities. Abusers could pressure partners to dampen the fear that protects them. Cults might combine ecstatic retrieval with pharmacology to rewrite loyalty. Advertising already works at the edge of your attention. Imagine it learning your sorest associations and muting them to slide a product into your blind spot. Resisting this demands more than outrage. It requires laws, yes, and it also requires culture, a shared understanding that forgetting is not always progress, and that remembering, even when it burns, is a civic duty as much as a personal burden. A society without long memory repeats its nightmares. Alternatives that often work better than we think. Because erasure glitters, we underestimate other arts. Trauma-informed therapy teaches the nervous system to time travel less rudely. Somatic practices, tremor release, paced breathing, grounding, give the body a language for safety that does not require permission from the past. Group work surrounds a memory with witnesses so it can't isolate and magnify. Ritual provides containers older than psychiatry, candles, water, song where grief can do its work without seeping into everything. Meaning-making is a technology as old as language. Why did this happen, and who can I be now? Answers change, and that's the point. Every new answer is a small, selective edit that leaves the truth intact and the tyranny weakened. Sometimes the most selective act is not to remove a thread but to weave in new ones until the old thread's color no longer dominates the pattern. A thought experiment. The thorn and the compass. A traveler pulls a thorn from their heel on a desert road. It has hurt with every step, teaching them where not to put their weight, teaching them how to walk around sharp stones. A stranger appears and offers a choice. Erase the memory of the thorn entirely, no pain, no lesson, or keep the knowledge without the sting. The traveler hesitates and then asks for something else. Turn the thorn into a compass. They want an artifact, not an absence. They want a small, honest thing they can hold to orient themselves. I was hurt there. I learned this. I do not have to hurt the same way again. Erasure is subtraction. A compass is transformation. This is the spirit in which we should approach any power over memory, not as janitors sweeping away the past, but as craftspeople turning debris into instruments. The man on the bench, revisited. He decides to go in. The clinician greets him with plain kindness. They review the plan. He names the ringtone, He names the door. He names the voice. They practice breathing until the room feels like a room and not a cliff. The clinician asks for permission to begin. He calls up the scene. His heart stumbles. His jaw tightens. His hands want to hide, but he stays. The clinician guides him to notice the chair under him, the air in his lungs, the sound of their voice like a railing. They mark, gently, the places where the memory demands he leap to conclusions. I am not safe. I am powerless. This will never end, and they offer new conclusions for his nervous system to test. I am here. I have choices. I can leave. They time a small pharmacological hush to the moment when the body would usually flood. He watches the wave rise, and this time, not knock him down. He returns the next week, and the next. He plays the ringtone in the car with a friend on speakerphone, and then while standing in line for coffee, and then on a quiet evening by a window, he keeps a notepad of victories and ambushes. The ambushes shrink, the victories grow boring, and boredom is a sign of healing. Months later, in a grocery store aisle, the song that used to drop him through the floor comes on. His stomach twinges the ghost of the old reflex, but his feet do not move. He picks up cereal. He smiles without fanfare. This, too, is selective erasure. Not the deletion of a track from the album, but the fading of a skip that had once made the whole record unplayable. He hasn't forgotten. He has been edited by courage, answering the question plainly. Can selective memory erasure be done? If by erasure you mean a surgical deletion of a specific autobiographical scene with no collateral changes, then in humans, today, the honest answer is no. The brain does not file your life like that. If by selective you mean targeting the distress, the panic, the involuntary autonomic storm linked to certain cues, while preserving the fact of what happened and the wisdom it brought, then the answer is often yes, partially, probabilistically, and ethically. Through a combination of reconsolidation-informed therapy, behavioral updating, and carefully chosen adjuncts, we can loosen knots. We rarely remove the rope. We can change what a memory does to your body and choices. We are not yet in the business of scissoring scenes from the film of your life. And even if one day we could, wisdom would ask us to prefer transformation over oblivion, a map for mercy. Let this be the simple map you fold into your pocket. Name the thread. The more precise the target, the kinder the edit. Keep the lesson. Aim to remove suffering, not knowledge. Work in windows. Invite the memory only when safety is present and help is at hand. Use gentle tools first. Breath, story, relationship, ritual. Add chemistry and current as supports, not saviors. Protect consent like oxygen. Without it, every intervention is theft. Honor coherence. Do nothing that fractures the through line of a life. Choose transformation over deletion. Compost what you can't carry. Grow something that can carry you. One day you may sit on a bench outside a building where people go to remember differently. You may go in, or you may keep walking, choosing instead to edit your story with the instruments you already own: time, friendship, craft, sleep, kindness. Whichever you choose, do it with reverence for the creature in your chest who has been learning since the first cry. Your memory is not your enemy. It is the archive of your attempts at survival. Treat it like a library that needs better lighting, not a warehouse to be burned for its heat. Even in a world of clever tools, the most selective erasure is love. Love that keeps the fact, turns down the hurt, and make space for another chapter. And the bravest line you can write in that chapter is simple: I remember, I remain, I go on.